Welcome everyone back to Into the Interchain. Today we have a very special guest from a very special project, and Into the Interchain hasn't been we haven't had an episode in a while, so this is really going to be kicking off another stage of Shape Protocol, highlighting partners and highlighting all the amazing building that's going on in Cosmos. So, with that being said, Cody, welcome to the show. If you could introduce yourself, who you are, how you got into crypto, and then introduce your project.
So my name's Cody Marks Bailey. I also go by Superfly. I've been using that moniker since about 1993, way back in the early days of the web. I'm with Andromeda. So my story about how I got into crypto, a lot of times people ask me, how long have you been in crypto? And a lot of people say, oh, I got into Bitcoin in 2012, 13, 14, Ethereum in 13, 14, 15, something like that. My story actually goes quite a bit further back than that. I got into crypto back in the early 90s. And when I say that, people kind of cock their head and they're like, yeah, but blockchain wasn't around till like 2010-ish, And I said, yeah, but all of the parts that make up blockchain were sitting on the table long before Bitcoin was put together. So you've got things like torrent system for libp2p, where you're doing a large peer-to-peer network. Distributed nature of these systems have been around for a long time, and it wasn't until Satoshi put them all together in kind of a unique and novel configuration to give us these chains of blocks. And so that's kind of how I came into it. I'm an engineer by trade. I really enjoy developing and like pushing technology and like kind of innovating on what's in the future. And right now, for the last 5 years, it has been it's been a real breath of fresh air in computing. We get like Web 2.0 was kind of exciting in like 2003, 2004, when we were first like doing a lot of like innovation, like the possibilities of what could be. And then it kind of stagnated for a long time. And then it wasn't until blockchains, the second generation with Ethereum and then third generation with Cosmos, you started seeing like this like sort of Precambrian explosion of like, we can do this, like we can really start building things that are meaningful beyond just like small proof of concepts and stuff like that. So now that's kind of my journey. 2017 was one of the co-creators of the ERC 721 NFT standard. Didn't really get into the whole monkey picture business. I kind of skipped that whole thing. I saw a much larger target with NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We've done some kind of quick assessments of what the NFT market can address one day, and that is about $850 trillion worth of assets in the world that NFTs, coupled with tokens, can address. And so I felt like taking my eye off the ball and worrying about monkey pictures and chasing that whole profile pic thing was a real disservice to the actual technology itself. So for the last 5 years, I was really dreaming about building what we now call Andromeda and the operating system that we've built. So that's kind of how I got here. Glad to share more.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So you've alluded to the fact that there's this very large total addressable market, and Andromeda is kind of seeding in to help make that a reality. So what is the problem at its heart? Where has Web3 and crypto struggled, and how is Andromeda helping solve that said problem?
So there are a lot of places that we're struggling in Web3. That's across every platform, every new platform that's out there, everything from the old school Ethereum and EVM based solutions to even going up to CosmWasm, which I think is the best performant VM out there, and for expression and getting things done. I think that there's a combination of usability. I think right now it's because we have so many people out in the public space shouting, come use my product, come use my product, come use my product, which also comes with come use my wallet, come use my wallet, come use my bridge, come use my, there's this real, really difficult learning curve for most users. And they log in like, well, I installed a wallet. It's like, well, you installed, MetaMask. You need to go install this. I'm like, well, I have my 12 word key phrase. Well, you need 24. Well, how do I get, it's just like all of this, like, Carter, I could go on for hours about this, right? Mm-hmm. Like I could go on for hours about all the different pain points. And what Andromeda tries to do is it tries to tame a lot of the technical difficulties that we have inside of the cosmos. We're really focused on inside the cosmos, or at least I should say, chains that are CosmWasm based. We don't really care about the proof of stake model or what you're using for like Tendermint. That's not a big deal. So whether it's Solana, which is also CosmWasm based, or any of the other ones out there, we're just trying to wrap our arms around this giant 70, 80, 90 network ecosystem that's growing. And I came from Ethereum where everything was L1 and L2 based, and I really didn't believe in that L1 L2 narrative. I saw it as being kind of a stopgap. Like, hey, yeah, we can shard off a lot of the traffic into another chain, but we've still got to pay rent back to the hub, right? We still got to pay rent, and there's no like trying to move tokens or assets from an L2 to an L2. You still got to go back through Ethereum, so you're still paying. Like, it's just that felt really wrong to me, and so I kind of stepped away with a combination of that and the EVM, and about 4 or 5 years ago, and started looking around, and that's when I found the Cosmos, and I was like, okay, this is like a peer-to-peer network of chains, right, with IBC, and you can like literally just connect where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how the internet's built, right? We don't have like one giant freaking router that we all throw all of our traffic through. We just we make sure it gets there one way or another. Mm-hmm. And that has shown, time and time again throughout software, throughout engineering, throughout any kind of complex system, to be a much better model, a much better system for doing what we're trying to achieve.
Mm. You describe Andromeda as an operating system. Mm-hmm. It's very specific language, and one could say uncommon language in this world of Web3. So what is an operating system?
Sure.
Maybe talk us through the importance of it within the original Web 2 story, and what does it mean for Andromeda to be trailblazing by building this kind of abstracted operating system on top of Cosmos?
Sure thing. So I was really hesitant to using the word like operating system when we first started this thing. I didn't really want to. That felt a little like marketing buzzwordy, like, oh, it's an operating system, and like we can go sell tokens on that. We can make a bunch of money by peddling this operating system narrative. And I was really hesitant with that, and really the whole team was, until we started like about maybe a year ago. We stepped back after looking at our code base and looking at it, going, guys, I think that qualifies for an operating system. I honestly, I hate to say it because I was real hesitant, So let's talk about what an operating system is in general. Like, let's talk kind of the Wikipedia definition of an operating system. It basically is a layer on top of the hardware. And we're talking about normal old school computers, right? Going going back to the 60s. Like you can overlay this back to the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and then all the way up to like your phone. And an operating system basically tames a lot of that hardware. It abstracts a lot of the really hard to use pieces of that hardware into things that are more user friendly. And so it also allows for what's called a user space, right? And so user space is like the environment in which you can address all the different resources in the hardware itself. So video card, monitor, printer, mouse, keyboard, all those kind of things. Now, those don't quite apply directly to blockchains. Blockchains don't really have monitors. We don't really have input. Like, we have input and outputs, but we don't have like hardware. In fact, the hardware layer has kind of just been sort of abstracted away into a decentralized network. Mm-hmm. So going up the stack, what Andromeda does, it's a set of contracts. It's a fairly large set of code that basically sits behind everything that you would be doing on blockchain. So instead of interacting directly with your wallet, which is just a public and private key, instead of having that directly talk to a protocol, there's a layer in between you as a user and the protocol itself, and that user space. And what you're able to do is do everything from like it's a unified layer, so that any position you might have in a financial product that's out there, be it a loan or an LP or staking or anything like that, it's used in a common user space. So all of those different, what we call ADOs, Andromeda Digital Objects, are things that you can actually recognize. Instead of opening up 10 tabs in your browser and having 10 different tabs where you can go do all this stuff, you actually have a layer that's on chain, that's managed and vetted, certified, audited, all that kind of stuff. And it gives a lot of that functionality on there. And so what happens is, instead of your wallet having to do all the heavy lifting, like managing IBC transfers or account balances, or like how many times do you go and like take out a loan on something and there's no like receipt, there's no like paper being left in your wallet saying like, hey, by the way, you deposited this stuff like 4 days ago, right? You kind of lose it. And like, I'm sure, Carter, you've been in crypto long enough. You stumble upon some old service out there, like, oh shit, I've got $100 sitting there. I didn't realize that. I totally forgot I did that one night. Like,
Yep.
I did it in a whim, and especially in a bull market where you're like slinging tokens everywhere, right? It'd be
Yep.
nice to have some sort of like common interface, common system that made sense of all that kind of stuff. So as a user, when you sit down and on your laptop or your phone, you just kind of use things. You just kind of use them, and you can copy and paste from one thing to another, or send information from one application to another, instead of having to like do everything through your wallet, where you're like, I mean, if you're doing like routine maintenance on a daily basis, and like let's pretend like we've got 10 positions on 10 different services, like you end up having like a bookmark folder, right?
Yep.
And every day you go through and you click sign, click sign, click sign, click sign, click sign. And it's like, oh, don't forget that one, click sign, click sign. And so like you end up racking, and it's not a matter of like gas, because like in the Cosmos, we don't really have that problem. But like this thing of like it just being a total freaking mess. Like, why don't we tame all this stuff, run it through one common system, so that all the projects, all the different protocols can talk to all the other protocols without having to write all this many to many stuff. You have a common layer, which we call AMP, the Andromeda Message Protocol, which allows for any protocol inside the Cosmos to talk to any other Cosmos protocol without any sort of like one-to-one matching. It's like standard in, standard out for the devs. It's like it just works. IBC handles just the same. You just, when you say, hey, I want to send it here, the operating system says, oh, that needs to go over here to this other, I'll send it along. And so we have an IBC channel set up. It handles all that kind of stuff. And the user doesn't have to like, okay, I got to transfer these tokens over, and then I've got to like wait a few, 30 seconds for the IBC transfer to happen. Then it's like, just freaking use it, just go. And so all that kind of stuff is wrapped up in this thing. And so when you look at it, it looks a whole lot like an operating system. Now there's handy things like, the Kepler web interface that does a pretty good job at like managing. So does is it Quasar? No, what's the one that Terra bought recently? The TFL bought them recently.
I know what you're talking about. I saw that.
Yeah, I was using it earlier. Those are just front ends. That's all web. That's all like Web 2 stuff, and it's just hitting APIs, and it kind of creates a little. What is it?
Pulsar.
Yeah, Pulsar. Yeah, great product, but that's all front end, kind of like with like TFM is also. That's all, and those things work great. That's awesome. That's a good approach. But we need more on-chain utility, so that all this stuff happens in the background in a programmatic way, and we're not having to update Web 2.0 APIs. So anyway, getting around to it, once we started looking at our kernel, like that's the base layer of what creates this this unification layer, this user space on chain. We started calling it a kernel, and we're like, well, shit, that looks like what you have at the base of an operating system, like the Linux kernel. You have usernames, you've got user accounts, you've got, it's like with key rotation, proper key rotation, you've got modularity inside of the system, extensibility from devs to come in and add functionality. So that, in other words, you're building a larger layer on top of this instead of these really brittle monolithic applications. Ta-da.
So it seems like there's some sort of a gap or space that exists between something like CosmWasm as like a smart contract framework, the on-chain space of data and relics and usability, and then all this off-chain infrastructure. And so right now a lot of it's being pushed off-chain for people to handle all of that complexity. And so one could say Andromeda is trying to bring some of that back on-chain in a way that should open up the design space too, because then you're closer to the chain, and it's more reliable, more distributed, and more interactable from just like it's not an off-chain database. It exists on-chain. Does that map properly?
So let's take the logic that you might have in a traditional trading environment. You have a crap ton of if this then that. If this position gets 65% LTV, then pull from here and do this. But you might have, well, I want to pull it in like all that logic, which I don't want to get into. It's everybody has their own trade strategies. But you can imagine the giant like if-then scenarios that you keep in your head as a trade strategy, right? Because you're more bullish on this, you're more bearish on that. If you're going to sell something, liquidate that first. The last thing I want to liquidate is that. There's all those different trade strategies, and that could be completely dependent on 10 different multivariant factors that come into this into your decision making. Well, right now you'd have to have some interface, right? custom made for you, or you've got to do it in a spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or maybe there's a helper app out there that you can kind of like aggregate some of this stuff. But then like if your laptop's shut, let's say you're skiing and like you get a flash crash somewhere, it'd be nice to have some sort of like on-chain like triggering mechanism that would automatically do this stuff versus like it being a race condition where it's like, who got to their wallet first to like get out, first in, first out. So you could harmonize a lot of this stuff by placing all that if this then that type logic on chain. You pour in something like Warp or an automation process, and boom, the whole system. Like, dude, you're not having to manage your portfolio daily. It all just sort of clicks. So you can start creating these like large monetary flows. You can start streaming cash, streaming all different types of positions, all and program all this stuff so that you can go enjoy life and not have to sit at your laptop every day and click sign, click sign, sign, click sign.
So all this off-chain infrastructure in the form of cron jobs that have questionable reliability, questionable performance, we turn those into an on-chain primitive in a much more cohesive fashion. With obviously, like the design space there is massive.
Right, and we don't like what Andromeda wants to do is we want to sit in the background. Like when you're using your laptop or your phone, you don't know that you're using Mac OS or Windows. You're using all these other applications.
Yep.
Windows, in the case of PCs, Windows makes that possible. iOS makes that possible, but it sort of it brings everything up to the application space. So, just like you said, it's aggregating, or it's abstracting a lot of that stuff back away from the user. So Andromeda wants to sit in the background. We don't want to be the star of the show. We make sure that the trains run on time, all the code works together. We set the standards, and then we let everybody else come and play on top of us.
One of my favorite questions to ask when you cross paths with a very innovative idea is, why has no one built it yet? Because usually there's a very good reason whenever there's an innovative idea of like, why has no one done it yet? So that would be my question for Andromeda. What is it timing? Is it just that's the question.
Well, yeah, so I think most of the seasoned Web3 builders, to be seasoned now, have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, right? To be seasoned, to be properly, like to live through a couple of ups and downs and like see all the hacks and all the problems. We all took a lot of our cues from Ethereum, right? And in Ethereum, the way you make money in Ethereum is you go build a monolithic protocol, yet another lending protocol or yet another, DEX, and you go out there and you build it that way. And if yours is slightly better than the one of the other person's, then you're going to like suck liquidity out and you're going to make money. That's a very financially driven decision making. It's all like, and we all live in that financial, like very focused on these financial rails. And I think that there aren't many developers in Web3 that are looking at these as complex systems, as like these are computers. These blockchains are just computers. Like squint your eyes a little bit, stop looking at the block time, and like it's a computer. It's a distributed computer. And if you look at any computer, whether it's distributed or not, there's a need for certain like layers of software that gets layered on top to make it easier for the user. The nice thing is that all the products that are currently out there in the Cosmos don't need to change a damn thing. All these monolithic builds out there in the Cosmos or otherwise don't need to change a single line of code. We can basically come inside, right on top of those guys and bring that stuff to the users. So there's no like, we don't have to convince anybody. We don't even have to make changes to like ask a chain if we can deploy on it. As long as it's not permissioned, like some of them are. We can just roll the AOS, the Andromeda operating system, out on any chain and just start plugging away at all those different protocols. And that way you're not, like Carter, when I met you, we were both like in the Secret and Terra communities way back in the day.
Yep.
And like we definitely had our like home chain, and like your home chain was like Secret, my home chain was Terra back in the day. And like the idea of like having a home chain, like what is that? Like why would I like limit myself to just now granted back in the day we didn't have IBC like we do today.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say, like, two years ago, man, how much progress has been made with IBC is kind of crazy to think about, and cross-chain contract
and
calls,
so right, and so protocols out there are no longer like really worried about what chain they're on, because it's like it doesn't really matter. The users can get to me no matter where I am. You know what I mean? So to make a goofy analogy, it's like, does anybody really give a shit if your Web 2.0 app is running on AWS or Azure? No, it's just like you just use it, and that's what we're trying to accelerate is that adaptability and like may the best man win. We aren't opinionated. We're very careful about that. May the best man win, and whoever wants to adopt quickest, we'll dance with. So that's where we are, and that's why I'm talking to you, buddy.
Yep. So something like with an operating system, there's two types of adoption. There's the people that build with it, and then there's the users that use it. So let's talk about both of those worlds. What does it mean for Andromeda to penetrate in terms of developer adoption? And then on top of that, how do we get users to begin using people that have built with AOS applications?
So this reminds me of an old school Steve Ballmer presentation he did at a Microsoft. Exactly. Well, the developers are they're the ones that build. They're the ones that have created this entire ecosystem. So the developers are like front and center for us. In fact, one of our taglines is "Come build with us." It's kind of generic and cheap. It works. I mean, it's like literally we can't do this without developer adoption. Now, the nice thing about what Andromeda does is like right now we need a lot of Rust developers, like the lowest level programmers, not quite like assembly type guys, but like, Rust is a pretty, that's no joke, right? But the cool thing is with this ADO architecture, once we start to get enough of the primitives built, like once we have enough of the objects out there that can be cast, it then becomes almost as easy as like having like needing a technical ability to use Excel, like that same sort of like, you don't have to be a programmer, know what a unsigned integer is or what a Boolean operator is or how to like manage memory and optimize for loops, that kind of stuff. But like someone who's really good at Excel, right? They can do some damage, man. Like, I mean, you can do some really good productive work in Excel. I mean, like there's guys out there that can play with Excel way better than I can, and I can program a lot better than they can. So what we want to do is as we go up that level, we have developers and then creators. Creators are sort of in that creative class that we think there's probably 100-to-1 ratio of developers to creators. Like Carter, I'll ask you right now, how many guys inside of our ecosystems that we talk to on a daily basis that we're in Telegram channels with, how many of them are Rust developers? Like 1 in 100 probably, like 1 in 250. I don't know.
Yeah, probably even more scarce than that. I would say per L1, it's like maybe even 1 dev per 1,000 community members. Like it's pretty insane.
Perfect. Now let's take that 1,000 users. Now, so what we have right now is we have 1,000 users and only 1 developer, and that's the addressable market. Like that's difficult. So what Andromeda does is it says, hey, why don't we take the next like say 100 out of that 1,000 or whatever the number is, but maybe 100 times the amount of Rust developers, and give them the opportunity to start developing things. This ADO system, this Andromeda Digital Object System inside the AOS, allows for anybody with a freaking mouse and a web browser to go and start drag and dropping these different applications. So it's a no-code builder, but with on-chain objects. So everything you create on screen, yes, it's in a browser, but when you hit publish, it goes out and it deploys all those different contracts, and it instantiates those contracts inside of a captured system of the AOS, and everything just sort of works. So you can start dragging lines from one protocol to another, and the interface goes, oh, wait, hey, by the way, those 2 protocols are on different chains, so we're just going to put a little IBC icon next to that line to let you know that it's going to go across an IBC channel. Or let's say you don't even care, right? Why even display that at all? So in other words, you get the full access to things, and that's what we have right now that's what we'll be launching with, is that whole thing. Or if you're a geek like me, we also have all the CLI, everything you can do in the web interface, you can do in the CLI, so you can automate shit, or enterprises can implement it, that kind of thing.
So from a developer's perspective, the design space is essentially as broad. It's like you're building these baseline verbs, and then the design space is a many-to-many relationship between the different verbs that you're putting together. So there's so many things you can do in Web3. Like, how do you try to abstract out this problem to have the most robust possible set of things to build with? Because it's like it's a weird design space right now, right?
It is. And I've been a Linux user since 1993, 1994, like way back when it was like really hard to use and there was nothing out there. There was like 2 distros. And the way you develop a system like this is the same way you eat an elephant, 1 bite at a time. And you gotta sit there and build each individual ADO. There's probably a Pareto distribution, like we'll hit someday where we like figure out like, okay, the magic number was like 80. We have like 30-ish right now, 30 ADOs. It's really hard to know when critical mass hits. because like with Linux or Unix, if you want to look at the GNU utilities, it's like, you got to get things like the basic functions. You got to have, cat, you got to do grep, you got to have like all these, and then you start getting into the more like fringy type applications or commands. And so what we do is we borrowed a page out of the Unix handbook, and that was like every ADO have it do one thing and one thing really well. Don't try to get too complicated. The complexity should come from taking each of those ADOs and stitching them together in a unique and novel way, just like you do with scripts on a Unix machine, right? So like you don't want one application on the command line that does too much. That's too big of an attack surface. Like stick with and use the complexity of stitching these things together.
I get chills. It's such a beautiful vision. I almost nauseating thinking about how much work is ahead, though. Like,
yeah, it is a lot. No, it is a lot. We fully admit that. And this is, we look across the landscape and like what Andromeda is trying to achieve, and we've only talked about the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, there's things like the file system. And when I say file, I don't mean storing JPEGs and MP3s and movies. I'm saying like a file being an object on a tree, basically, that represents some sort of thing, right? Whether that's a position or a value or a name or a list or an array or whatever. We need those kind of things, and we don't have them right now. So it is a lot of work, Carter. It's going to be a ton of work. But as far as there's a time to be meek and there's a time to be ambitious, and right now we see the time to be ambitious. So we're full steam ahead.
So before we transition into maybe some of the Shade Protocol, X Andromeda, and privacy side of things, I want to kind of open the space here to talk about like what are the challenges you faced, not just as a project but as a team. I want to go a little deeper. I want the human side a little bit for communities to understand. Like your guys' journey in particular, I think is incredibly special. So walk us through those low moments and how you've grown as a team, those lessons that you've learned. I just kind of want to give you that opportunity to be as open as you'd like.
Yeah, boy, this is going to be a fun one. We've got a great team. From our engineers being dedicated and seeing the vision, to the business team, to the development, the public development side, the marketing, all those pieces. And we've borrowed a lot of pages out of a really seminal book from the 1990s called The Cathedral and the Bazaar, and we lean back and forth both ways. So some of it is run organically. That's kind of how that's like sort of my style. And then sometimes we do it a little more regimented, a little more structured. And I've got 3 absolutely amazing partners, guys that are at this point beyond partners. They are like family to me. I mean, we've got a bond. We've been through, when you go through a hyper bull and then a hyper bear and then a hyper, like nothing in this space is easy to build in. And Carter, you know that too. You and I have shared messages back and forth, and some of the rough days, some of the good days, some of the sunshine, some of the showers. But who's in it for the fight. Like this is this is economic warfare we're dealing with. This is people that have way too little fear and way too little common sense to be doing what we're doing in this industry. And when you find people that resonates with, and you go to battle with, you find out real quickly like who's there to ride or die, and so that's been a big piece. As we transition into a more publicly organic, type of organization, where we start interfacing with the public and developers as we blossom out of our cocoon, and start launching and deploying the operating system out there. Things are going to change a little bit. We got to open up, and we got to kind of run like an open source program project in some ways. We have to be considerate of the public's input and will. Of course, you got to listen to your stakeholders out there. And so this is an area that I love. I love having, like, I think that's a beautiful way to operate. And for me, it's a natural way. So yeah, man, it's tough, but it's a lot of fun. We've had a lot of team members come and go, some that come and go back and forth based on time requirements or whatever. Or you've got some fanboys out there that'll just like, hey, give me something to do, man. I just want to help out. And that's always wanted. And so there's definitely building a culture inside the inner organization, and then like some of the onion layers that go out. it's all about that culture,
Yep.
and it kind of starts in the core, right? You got to believe. You can't just put bumper stickers everywhere and expect the community to, like, you have to live these things. And so that's kind of where we're at. That's what we live for.
Well, it puts a smile on my face. It's that is the resiliency to build on top of incredibly complex systems with a vision for simplicity and a drive to actually execute on it is
Yeah.
it's an absurd thing, but it's beautiful at the end of the day to have the opportunity to do that. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Definitely cheering for you guys.
Yeah.
Now I suppose we can shift to the kind of Shape Protocol X Andromeda side of things. I'll do a brief 45-second pitch for anyone who's listening for the first time, maybe from the Andromeda community that doesn't know about Shape Protocol. Essentially, we've had a thesis for 3+ years at this point that privacy is the key to unlocking the full value of a decentralized future. If we build out these incredibly complex, beautiful, permissionless financial ecosystems, but they lack privacy, that something is going to be lost in the process, and that we're entering and we're headed towards a panopticon as opposed to a system that protects individual liberty and sovereignty. And so we view privacy as something that's both idealistic but also incredibly practical at the same time in terms of security and the type of data that it protects. And so Shape Protocol, we're a set of smart contracts built on top of Secret Network. We've been building for over 3 years at this point in terms of ideation, the community members that have been here from day one. And we've launched multiple DeFi primitives that are world's firsts in their own right. And so, yeah, that's the opportunity with Andromeda we see is the ability to integrate with their operating system over the course of the next year or two, but also to help empower broader communities to get access to the Andromeda token so they can begin participating in this distributed system, this distributed community and story. And simultaneously, I believe, between the builders, there's also a shared ethos about privacy. So, Cody, I'll hand it back to you if you want to talk about your perspective on privacy and your perspective on Shape Protocol and that type of relationship.
Sure. Yeah, and just to touch on the thing we talked about a second ago about that culture piece, that ties right into our belief in privacy, security, privacy, all these different tenets. And so our opportunity to work with Shade comes from this very, very simple approach that we take to privacy. In our mind, imagine going into your file browser on your machine, right clicking and just hit make private. Right? Just you can right click on any object on the system and just put make private.
Yeah.
Right? And boom, the operating system goes, hey, no problem. Now I know what to do. I'm going to send it over to Shade, wrap it, maybe spit it back or keep it over there or whatever, and I can or generate the whole damn thing from over there, right? Because we have this AMP protocol that kind of obfuscates a lot of that stuff. And so to have Shade as one of the core building blocks of the AOS brings that level, or I'm sorry, that ability out of the box, out of the box on day one, right click, make private, boom, you're there. And so all of the different offerings, which, Shade is a one-stop shop for pretty much all your DeFi needs. Y'all have done an incredible job. The interface and everything is great. We just come right in and basically say, okay, cool. We'll just use all those things and bring them to the user in a different way. And the cool part about it is even though the AOS kind of sits in between Shade and the user, we don't take anything from Shade. We don't diminish anything you're doing. There's no we don't take the skim off the top. There's no discount on staking. We don't get into that kind of stuff. We have a completely different economic model because we don't want to take from you guys.
Yep.
We want to bring. And so for you, the value prop that I would have with you, Carter, if I was talking to you on day 0, would be hey, Carter, do you like users? And you're going, yeah, I like users. Okay, so what if I told you I had a product that doesn't take anything from you but just brings you users? You'd go, all right, let's talk. And so that's been the entire model. And luckily, the architecture, the software architecture, and the way that CosmWasm and this sort of IBC and Cosmos ecosystem allows for all that to happen. Add in IBC hooks, and man, you don't even need a CosmWasm on the other chain. You can just throw shit over and bring it back, and wrapping it all inside of Secret, where it's a right click, make private, boom. Geez, man. But this is a good example explaining what I was talking about. Like, if I mean, how many protocols are out there across the 70 chains? Let's call it 1,000 protocols. Each one of those protocols would have to write an adapter for secret, right?
Yep.
Right?
It's true.
Right?
100% true.
Build it one time on Andromeda, and it services the entire industry. So it works everywhere. Like, we can't do this many to many, or like wrapping everything and having it all like writing adapters and announcing some goofy like, oh, our lending protocol over here on whatever chain now works with osmosis. It's like, why doesn't everything work with everything? Like, why are we making an announcement about that? That's a really slow boat to getting true interoperability. So IBC allows for it, but there's more to it than that.
And I've actually can attest to this specifically on the privacy side. Secret Network is a top 5 IBC chain by volume. There are many Cosmos chains out there with larger market caps, larger everything. But like, Secret Network is actually used, and what we've seen is a lot of wallet partners, a lot of DeFi protocols, they get to Secret and they're like, oh, it's something custom, so we're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And so then we have to try to go and get these custom integrations done. But if this is the type of system where we can build that type of adapter to get people to plug in seamlessly in a way that's not off-chain infrastructure, not an API endpoint, but an actual like on-chain object, then the doors start to open up for like getting people to integrate without it feeling like some laborious 25-hour side quest that one of their developers is intimidated by. Just go interact with an ADO, right? Right.
Just send the unit over there. Everything is taken care of on the back end. Because at the end of the day, like, all those adapters writing for secret, like, what, probably 70, 80, 90% of the code is all the same.
Yeah.
It's not standardized. Yep. Like, it's not codified. We do that. Bring one adapter, just basically write a translation script that basically just maps over to a common vernacular inside the API, and we're off to the races.
Boom. That's so exciting. So I think you've done a good job describing, like, an example of how Andromeda can have a direct relationship with Secret Network and Andromeda. Maybe now talk a little bit about your perspective on privacy as an ethos. We talked about it from a very practical, make file private. So now maybe from an ethos side, I know you care a lot too.
Yeah, brother, this is like the can of worms thing. This is the kind of stuff that gets you delisted on YouTube, this kind of talk. I was raised by the right people, man. I was raised by a great family and great mentors, teachers, co-workers, just people around me. I've had a really gifted life as far as that. I've always seeked people smarter than myself to hang out with. If I ever found myself in a room where I was one of the smartest people, it's time to find a new room and keep learning. And through that journey, and thinking for myself and being, my parents kind of raised like their children to have very open minds, like to be very, very open-minded and self-sufficient, not reliant on others. Cowboy way. I was, raised in a very rural type setting, and that's the way you got to be. And so like this reliant on like collectivism was always something that was never like pushed, this like idea of collectivism and like, it was all very, very independent based, the individual is more important than the collective. And so that's been ground zero for me my entire life. And it wasn't until I got into these spaces and started really hanging out with some crazy libertarians where people were saying, oh yeah, you're an individualist, of course. And I'm like, oh, that's what I am. I didn't realize because I wasn't taught. Yeah, right. And things don't really make sense until you can actually name them. And so I don't really have any traditional education. Like I didn't go to college. I didn't like sit in a classroom and get like indoctrinated into all these different pieces.
Yep.
Good or bad. I mean, like I'm not saying that going to college gives you bad indoctrination, but no matter where you go, you're going to be indoctrinated into one form of thought or another. And so by having this like really, really diverse set of mentors and educators throughout my life, like whatever was interesting me at the time, I went towards that direction and found myself where I am today, which brings us to a lot of these tenets that myself, I've got my paw prints all over this project, obviously. And then, so do my other, partners in this deal. And obviously there's a little bit of recruiting based on ethos, right? So it's like, okay, that's great that you're a Rust dev, but like, what flags do you fly? Like what are you made of, right? Why are you into this space?
Yep.
And if you're in it purely for the money, man, there's probably better projects to work for. If you're like strictly in it for the money,
yep.
like that, like dude, I'm just here for the money. Like as soon as I get my cash, I'm out. You don't want that. And Carter, you know how to hire on this thing.
Yeah.
If we're also at the moment we're a non-inflationary based ecosystem, so we don't do any inflation, and that's because we don't believe in inflation. Like that was like a really core tenet to ours, and we're doing everything we can to prevent that from happening. Um, and then like the whole model has been built around that piece. Privacy, that there's a right to privacy. There is an absolute right to privacy, and the recent sort of, I guess, marketing pivot that Secret did with the privacy as a service was freaking brilliant. It's like, look, this should be just something that anybody can use. It's like we believe in it. Right click, make private. That's like none of this like sign up for this thing or make it difficult, or like that should just be as comfortable for someone to do as it is to share an opinion on a social media platform, or the way it should be, I guess, on a social media platform. And so those are tenets that are baked into the decision making. It's not an afterthought. It's not we can tack this on because we're getting a lot of requests on Twitter for people to ask for this. Like, no, it's baked in from the beginning. It's there. And so a lot of these pieces, are beyond privacy, beyond inflation, beyond all these pieces. There's a lot in there. And in fact, Brendan, one of my partners, wrote a 25-point thesis that he wrote himself. He took a lot of input from everybody on the team. But that 25-point thesis that we published about a year ago is like some really great thought pieces that we rally around. Privacy is in there. It's a pretty big section of it. But it all kind of fits together. And if you look at all of those things together, you start to form a sort of general sense of like what direction Andromeda sees for the future. And if we're trying to be this sort of platform or this layer that gets adoption by everybody above and below our layer, L1 or chain, and then in protocol, however you want to look at that, like we have a responsibility to be good stewards of those ethoses, and like not take a skim, not to be a leech on society, to not like for developers to get paid, and to there's a lot of those economic demands that are on the system, but the ethos is baked into it from top to bottom, and you can see that throughout the code, the way the documentation, the way we talk about things, the way we reference things, the entire piece. It's emblematic of that.
One of the questions I asked earlier was, why has no one built this yet? And I have a firm belief that some ideas that have such a long time horizon in order for them to succeed, that the only way they ever come to fruition is if the right people with the right ethos are building it. And so I think Andromeda may be an example of that. It hasn't been built, not because the idea hasn't necessarily existed, but because the level of determination, resiliency, and devotion to the open source movement and these values, it's very rare to find a group that can come together and pull that off over a long time horizon. But it's the only way it's possible is with those types of people.
You hit the nail on the head right there. You got to have determination and vision, and boy, our team has both of those. I mean, there's a vision here, and there's an unrelentless pursuit of that vision. And we could have taken a lot of different decisions along the way through the hard times to make it, to pivot or to water it down or to lighten up or whatever. But the only way to do something like this is to do it the way we are doing it. Like you can't do this thing halfway. Like you can't do it as a toy. It can't be, of course, like there's a lot of projects out there that for very good reason, ship often. They ship often. I mean, the guys over at Kujira are like famous for doing like those guys just like they must have 1,000 guys back there. They don't, but it feels like it because the amount they're shipping. But for what we're trying to do, it took a lot of study. We've probably thrown away way more code than we've actually pushed over the finish line, just because there's no one's done this here. There's no reference model. There's no here's our I guess in war, you have a plan, but as soon as you enter the battlefield, okay, well, that's out the window. Now you got to improvise, and that's kind of how designing an operating system works. Or we could have taken a PhD type approach where you get a bunch of PhDs in a room that want to pontificate for 15 years and never actually produce code. So there's kind of a balance between, kind of get shit done and like careful study. And I think we hit a pretty good balance there.
You can't have only engineers and you can't have only philosophers.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta have both, and healthy respect between both sides.
Yes.
Like you gotta have, and that's part of the temperament we look for.
Well, I think this has been an amazing episode. I think the only other thing I can I'll round things out here and say, beyond this type of long-term integration with Shade and long-term ethos alignment and partnership, we're also looking forward to getting Andromeda on Shade Swap as something token-wise that people will have access to. This will be one of the first venues in all of Cosmos where people will be able to acquire this, and there'll be lots of tutorials out to teach people how to go and bridge your, get that ANDR on the DEX, bridge it over to Andromeda, and start getting involved in that ecosystem on the staking side. We're going to be super pumped to educate the community on that. And yeah, I just really look forward to seeing where you guys go. This episode has really, every time I talk with you, Cody, I feel like I get to peer behind the veil a little bit, and it feels like even over the course of the years, like I think of that 2021 conversation versus now, and it feels like there's a steadiness there, a foundation, a rock solid foundation that's been slowly being built up, where these ideas are becoming more and more self-evident, I guess. Like it's quicker. The ability for me to listen and understand and draw lines on where Andromeda's head is like, oh, this is like quick, much quicker. Yeah. And that's a sign of that's a compliment. That means Andromeda continues to mature, and that's so exciting.
Yeah, we're right there, man.
On that note, Cody, how can people get involved? What's the best way to get involved in the Andromeda community? And yeah, how can people get involved?
Probably best way to do it is, because these days with all the spam and all the hackers and bullshit out there on the social media, just go to andromedaprotocol.io. No dashes, no weird spellings, just andromedaprotocol.io. And you can find our social links there. Discord's a good place if you're a developer, if you want to come and ask questions and get involved with some code pushing. If you're interested in tutorials and stuff, we've got some great YouTube videos that kind of really talk you through what's going on and kind of demonstrate things in a very articulated way. And then we also have a kind of a developer testnet that we use for onboarding and doing user testing. We're always looking for more beta testers to come in and start playing around with the AOS itself, the interface, all that kind of stuff. And we've got a really good, really vibrant community of users there that are chomping at the bit to push the system into ways we never thought would be done.
In summary, build with us.
Yeah, any way you want.
Well, this was Into the Interchain, and I'll close out the episode by saying also check out Shade Protocol at shadeprotocol.io. We believe it's all about your money, your data, your decisions. That's Shade Protocol. That's what we're focused on. Stay tuned on Twitter. Be sure to jump in on those liquidity pools. And until next time, guys, have a good one.